The reason we don't do things in life in timely manner is because we are not, as it were, as if not in a full possession of understanding. So I personally do not see this as having no courage in doing it right now, right here, and giving it to the postponement. To me, it comes only from understanding. When understanding is great enough, we already have that power which basically will not allow anything to stand on its way of knowing what is.
Hello.
Hello?
My name is Paula. I'm the first time with you. It's quite powerful. I'm touched. I feel fear when I hear your words, because I have a sense that they mean like death of what I know about life, what I know about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I can watch my mind working with ideas like, you've got so much going on here and there. There's work, there is family, there are children, there is whatever. There is a whole lots of things going on here. And maybe one day, later on, maybe when I'm like oldie, so I can devote myself to these questions. And what I'd like to point is that I can see this is just an excuse not to face what really is. Probably because of my fear of losing my identity, losing my beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a way, this is a classic. A classic. In terms of its universally applicable nature of what you have shared. Fear here is being brought right out into the open in its connection, or rather as that quality of experience when we are challenged. Challenged, that is when whatever set of values, system of values, ideas we hold on to dearly are perhaps in danger of being challenged. Not even yet challenged, but being perhaps, we can feel that there is a possibility that these are maybe challenged. So let me maybe first speak to fear itself, so that we can have also a clearer understanding that fear here has, in terms of how it is understood in perennial traditions, at least from the point of view of perennial wisdom, fear here is not a negative experience. Fear here is what reinforces, in a way, reinforces a sense of acuity. So before we go into the dismantling, let's say, the premises behind why that what we're afraid of is not and cannot be found, I want us to acknowledge the value of fear, first and foremost, as that power which, as I have said, reinforces, a kind of shakes things up, because fear, in a lot of ways, in the way we are wired, also instructs us in terms of the acuity, which otherwise can become number and number. So the fear itself, of course, is not something that one wants to experience on a daily basis. But when it comes to this, what we discuss right now, fear has been acknowledged in most spiritual traditions as an important and legitimate response, because it sharpens our awareness. You see? It sharpens our awareness. It's like I give examples of the difference between walking in a park and walking in a jungle. In the park, we know everything is treated. We are here guests, customers. We walk around sluggishly with zero awareness sometimes of what we do, because it doesn't matter. I'm in a park. In the jungle, every step goes with great awareness. Why? Because there is an accompanying element, there is a fear. It is the fear, primordial fear, that is a driving force here. So it has this safety mechanism there inbuilt. When we walk in a flat territory, when we walk in a valley, we can just walk like this, whistle around, right? But in elevated areas where the slopes becoming steeper and the pathways narrower, our acuity of perception undergo change. And we no longer just take every step for granted. We actually think where we put the foot. Anyone who walked in the mountains beyond the, again, park theme knows that that is the case. We can continue making these analogies now. I gave that analogy now, we'll fork it out again. It's only, in Berlin we talked about, I think, when you work with a real sharp object, sharp knife, it's the fear of cutting that is much greater, that gives the appreciation of working with an amazing tool. When you hold a tool, let's say, Moyachi-made knife from Japan, it's at once a work of art, an amazing tool in the kitchen, and a deadly weapon. Whatever we cut, whether we slice tomatoes to a transparent thin level for our pizza, or chopping the cucumbers, we are more aware to each and every move we make. If we are just using this blunt knife from IKEA, which even if I miss there, it's not, oh gosh, it failed to cut my finger, just about to mush the tomato into a paste instead of cutting. So the fear here acts to our advantage, is it not? It sharpens our awareness, that's what I'm trying to say. So the fear here is what sharpens our attention. It brings our attention and makes it more acute to what is now being applied, because this attention then is all we have. This attention becomes the greatest tool. This attention, if we are to continue with this analogy, is what can cut. And it is the cutting that is given repeatedly as that what is capable of allowing the insight into the nature of reality. It's the sword of discrimination. It's not a bamboo stick of discrimination. It's not a baseball bat of discrimination, it's a sword of discrimination. That's how it's addressed, again, within the perennial traditions, a beautiful metaphor spoken by a great pacifist, perhaps the greatest pacifists ever lived. Adi Shankara gave that analogy in his Viveka Chudamani. And of course, it did not bore with him, it had been possibly generations upon generations before him used. Where that respect for a weapon that cuts was shared by both members of caste society, equally by warrior caste and by the castes of priests, who were like this historically in many cultures. So this sword of discrimination have to be sharp. You can't cut, if the blunt knife cannot cut tomato in a kitchen properly, how can we cut something which requires this level where we can actually slice reality to see into the nature of things? So that fear need to be acknowledged here for what it is. It's not that somehow the goal here to instill fear. Far from it. I hope I'm a likable guy. It's not like, it's not like you're sitting in front of the samurai here, right?
You said it's not like I'm in front of a samurai. It feels like a little bit I am in front of a
okay,
samurai.
well, yeah, but I'm saying like a samurai on Sundays, okay? I'm not on a duty. I'm not wearing I'm not like, even when you look at the samurai's outfit, when there is no samurai inside, it looks, woo, in the museums, right? So it's not for the sake of instilling fear, but whenever something is truly touched, there is fear. And let's acknowledge that. Let's all acknowledge when we come closer to truth, often is accompanied by fear, because we're coming here to address something which is not a frivolous affair. And that has that quality to it. So first I wanted to speak to fear, so as to turn this into a positive sign which sharpens our attention. When our attention is sharpened, only then we are ready to penetrate into anything. Only we are ready to dissect. Because up until that takes place, the tool of our inquiry is too blunt. It has no capacity to cut through. So this, speaking to fear and the primordial quality, not that our life should be lived in fear, just in case someone will start making this, putting two and two together. No. There is fear and there is fear. So, further to this, and you have brought it as that, I would say quite a self-acknowledging ramification that at least part of you feels that whatever that is may be better to be addressed later on in life when things are more conducive, right? When we're in that age, when we give ourselves to all this, and this perhaps is one of those things that can be seen as an addition into that what we otherwise have dealt with, done, right? And now we can give ourselves to whatever that is. Whatever that is here could be spiritual endeavor, right? To finding out what is what. It could be creative endeavor as well. There are many people out there who feel they cannot be creative because the life is not allowing them to be creative. They feel that they are under the pressure of having to perform, adhere to the circumstances. This is why I'm making this now analogy between the state of creativity and what it means, what it represents, and quest for truth. And you yourself acknowledged that immediately upon saying that you also recognize that this could be an excuse, at least an excuse of sorts, not to address it now, because there are plenty of otherwise justifiable reasons not to do that. So nobody can stop you there, you see? You already speak that. If you speak that, it means that you already have a degree of acknowledgement of that. So what is it to reflect there? And it's not that it is somehow up to me to tell, yes, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Don't worry about this and that. Take the bull by the horn now. What do you know about the future? How do you know how things will pan out? Children will grow up, they will no longer be in your dependence, relationship will take a form where there's like nothing left to prove. It's like, I can now finally give myself to what I love doing. It's not up to me to tell you, no, do it now. Because guess what? It works not in that way. It will work only out of necessity. Out of necessity. And that necessity is here on par with the innate sense of intelligence. So not to be taken personally by yourself, let alone anyone in the audience, in the room tonight. But it is that what makes the difference. When we understand something truly, that becomes a point of entrance where we know we no longer exempt from essentially making that very, very logical step because we have understood something. The reason we don't do things in life in timely manner is because we are not, as it were, as if not in a full possession of understanding. So I personally do not see this as having no courage in doing it right now, right here, and giving it to the postponement. To me, it comes only from understanding. When understanding is great enough, we already have that power which basically will not allow anything to stand on its way of knowing what is. And certainly, if it comes to the understanding, what does it amount to live life fully? And why we are here obliged, it's our purpose to be happy. Then nothing can override that. No outer set of circumstances, no obligations, no responsibilities, because we will see things in a way that things are and how they are driven. Because in a lot of things, the cart is being put before the horses. And when we see that that is not the right state of affairs, nothing can stop us. Because this is in itself an unstoppable process of the evolution of the soul. Soul doesn't evolve with respect to circumstantial set of our responsibilities. Very often than not, it works despite the odds, or irrespective of anything that we are encountered with and having to adhere to, because that's what the force of evolution of the soul here represents. And it is, of course, first is being experienced as fear, because that's what challenges that. And that fear here acts as that sharpening agent. But also, now we want to speak to that also so that we don't leave that without addressing. If that what is now being, let's say, served us as that shake-up, not accompanied by great penetration into the essence of how things are, we will not summon up enough courage to do what we want in any given moment in time. It will always be given to postponement. But the simplicity of the situation is such that we can only be happy now. We cannot be happy in the future. And we can only be true now. We can only be true in the future. Nothing takes place in the future. Absolutely nothing. This is where we are being played by the mind. This is where we enter the domain of games. So this is why I said it cannot be dodged in a way. It cannot be dodged. Nor can it be encouraged on the outside, because all is required is perhaps pointing to the source of understanding itself. And then the understanding becomes that power, which is unstoppable. Then everything in our life is incorporated into that completely, because we no longer see ourselves as a somehow separately acting agent with objects scattered around. These objects include our nearest and dearest, our immediate setup, career, work, family, everything, all the set of responsibilities. All this is seen separate only because we ourselves have scattered. When all this is being summoned up, everything is acts from the place of understanding that all this is governed by the same supreme laws. It's not governed by some chance, the god playing dice, and all the rest of it. It has a very different quality to it, you see? But it is for you and only you to really being able to not just stop at the entrance point of inquiry to whether do I take it or whether do I, It's like, Pinocchio was curious enough and poked the picture with his nose. If he didn't, he wouldn't have discovered that the whole thing is right. The Italians have that, the story of Buratino, right? It's that. It's also curiosity. One has to be curious enough so as to pierce the screen of appearance, pierce the picture. Because then behind that screen, obviously, the analogy, there is a door, and door leads to outside of this, right? Fragmented, limited perspective of reality, of our life. Thank you.